Hello Spartans, Krista here. In 2019, the Evolved crew was honored to speak with the wonderful Greg Bear, the award-winning science fiction author and one of the original founders of San Diego Comic-Con. He wrote over 30 novels, including 3 for the Halo franchise, Halo Cryptum, Halo Primordium, and Halo Silentium, making up what is now known as the Forerunner Trilogy. We also spoke with his daughter Chloe, who wrote the epilogue to the trilogy, Halo Rebirth, and was her father's in-house Halo encyclopedia while writing for the franchise. Greg passed away over the weekend at the age of 71. To remember him and all he did for the science fiction community, we are re-releasing our interview with him and his daughter Chloe from 2019. In the interview, we discuss his life, how he shaped and was shaped by the science fiction community, and his experience writing the Forerunner Trilogy for the Halo franchise. Whether you have heard our interview with Greg and Chloe before or not, we hope you enjoy listening to this interview as much as we enjoyed speaking with them. And without further ado, we bring you our interview with Greg and Chloe Bear.
Welcome Spartans to Podcast Evolve, your favorite Halo podcast. I am your host today, David, and today we have another very special episode for you. We are joined by Krista.
Hello.
Aaron.
Hey guys.
Oren.
Hey everyone.
And very special guest, we have Craig Bear, who is the author of the Forerunner saga, which you probably already know, Cryptum, Primordium, and Silentium. But also we are joined by a super special guest, Chloe Bear, who along with her father wrote Halo Rebirth, which I had totally forgotten about. Sorry about that. So it's like the secret one that you guys did, and you did like an unusual way of release. So I want to say it's not all my fault, but it is probably all my fault.
It was hidden in the trade paperback of the Torah edition.
Well, there was like a download code for it that would take you to. Did you read the text of it for the audio version?
I read the out loud read the text for it in their studio. So Chloe wrote it and I read it, and they put it into the audio version. And there's some stories about that too, but let's ask them later.
Absolutely. So guys, again, thank you very much for joining us. We know you're all the way from Seattle, which seems convenient given the fact that that's also where they make Halo. So that's got to be cool.
Yeah, we would go over there and take a look at their studios, but it was such an amazing operation. They wouldn't let me take a picture of it, though, because it was all proprietary and top secret. It was like being in the Defense Department.
They only let me on the ground floor when I went up.
Yeah, same. The elevators were off limits.
There were Spartans guarding the door.
But also, they when they were doing the game, they allowed me to watch some of the voice actors doing their voices in studio, putting basically some of the scenes in the novel to life, and that was great fun. So almost like being on a movie set.
That is actually pretty cool. I think I remember seeing a quote of them saying that how they recorded Halo 4 was not like the other games. So it was the first one where they had actors together interacting and stuff like that. So that was probably worth seeing.
Kind of like a regular movie, although they did not have CGI green screens. I don't think they had green screens. They might have. I don't know quite all the things they used to bring some of the characters to life, but they certainly used the voices.
So I was going to do a little bit of general chit-chat about the pair of you, especially because when I started looking into both of you, there are some things that cropped up where I was like, holy crap. You keep that very quiet and very to yourself. So first off, I know Oren is similar to yourself. We both grew up like a Navy. I think, Oren, your dad is in the Army, or is it Navy? I'm not sure. But you both traveled around as kids and, like, I think landed up in the same places. Am I right in assuming, Oren?
Well, yeah, so my father was in the Marine Corps. He flew and actually still does fly C-130 aircrafts. Now he's retired. And so we've moved around all across the U.S. and lived in Japan and Indonesia overseas. But where are some of the places that you've lived?
Well, I came back to San Diego area when I was 12 But before that, we had been in Texas, Rhode Island, the Philippines, all sorts of places, as my father was a meteorologist. We met up with a lot of Marines. I don't know if we met with your dad. When was he in service?
He was in service relatively recently, 1990 to about 2015, around there. He hit like 22 years. I don't think the math quite added up there, but...
It's okay, we don't worry about numbers.
1966. He got off the carrier of the Oriskany, which is worth looking up if you want to watch it on YouTube. There's all kinds of history on the Oriskany, but he got off the carrier just before they had a major disaster on it. And
oh my gosh!
Yeah, so he was retired at that point, and yet we still had a lot of activities to go to for the Navy to help support people and everything. So it was very interesting. I picked up my understanding of some of the Marine Corps attitudes and some of the Navy and military attitudes, which I put into the trilogy that I wrote. War Dogs trilogy. Then I had some of my friends who were in the military take a look at that and make sure I was getting it right. And I think I remembered enough that it kind of worked. Anyway, it was also put into the Halo books in a sidewise way, kind of an overall scrim, so to speak, on what was going on with Bornsteller and everything. Meanwhile, Chloe was my expert on all of this, and so I referred to her when I needed to find out stuff. And then I would go to the 343 people, and they would confirm, and they give me amazing freedom up until the very last book. And we can tell a story about that.
Oh, definitely. Before we go too far into Halo, one other thing that definitely caught my eye is that you were one of the original... Now, there's different facts around, so I'm going to say you're one of the 5 that started San Diego Comic-Con back in the late 60s.
It sounds probably more like 7 or so, 8. 5 of us in one high school were part of the original committee.
That's amazing.
We were at a school called Crawford, which is still there, and a major kind of big school. In 1968, we all got together, and Scott Shaw, David Clark, John Pound, Roger Freeman, and me, and we were all friends and kind of met each other in different junior high schools and ended up at Crawford, most of us. And then we went on to become big comic book fans and science fiction fans, going to the Worldcon in Claremont Hotel in the San Francisco area in 1968. And after that, there was Comic-Con. So Comic-Con started about 1970.
That's awesome. And so I think every nerd around the world, it's like that's the one they want someday, pie in the sky. I want to get there. I did the one in Dublin, which is on a way smaller scale. But I imagine, Krista, Orrin, I don't know if either of you have gone to the San Diego one, have you?
No, it's really hard to actually get tickets for it sometimes. Sometimes it sells out of just basic tickets in the first couple hours.
If only we knew someone on the committee who perhaps...
I think that would be taking advantage of our position, David.
Because it's the 50th anniversary. So
wow.
they are going to be celebrating us, those of us who are around. And we're going to be, I don't know how many panels we're doing. You know, Comic-Con kind of runs on its own. And long after we left or stopped being key to the committee ran itself very, very well and suddenly acquired people that were just really top-notch at running major organizations. And so we could tell many stories about that, but I don't know whether you want to deviate from Halo or...
We won't go too far, just because I know how much we want to talk about everything else. So I will say, Aaron, I know you were interested, and it did catch my eye. You illustrated and even wrote some Star Trek comics, or it was a book, wasn't it?
I wrote a Star Trek book called Corona.
That's exactly it.
And that was back in '83 that I wrote that. And I was working on my first computer, and I says, okay, I'll write a Star Trek novel so I can learn how to write on this computer. And I did, and it was pretty well received. In a weird way, I've ended up writing in nearly every major franchise except for Richie Rich. I never wrote one of those novels. So.
You did a Jurassic Park comic too. So.
Yeah. Chloe and I put together.
Yeah, I seen that too. You seem to have a finger in a lot of franchises and are quite comfortable moving in and out.
Well, if we go back to my Star Wars novel, I was a Star Wars fan and raised our kids in the Star Wars universe. And you
mean you raised them properly?
Yes, we did. We were quite fundamentalists in that area. Just as I was I forget the correct phrase is a Trekker or a Trekkie back in the 60s, I became a Star Wars fan when we first saw the film, and I wrote about it for the Los Angeles Times back in '77, just after it came out. And that article turned out to be fairly influential because I was talking about science fiction in relation to movies. And I did that for the LA Times for about 4 years thereafter, and that was great fun.
Yeah, we're just a huge family of nerds, basically, so we're into everything.
Awesome.
That's it. We're in the grand family of nerds here, so that's our overall clade.
Yeah, my dad pretty much did the same thing, where he was a big Trekkie, and a lot of my youngest memories is watching Star Trek with him. So that's kind of where it began for me too. So Aaron, I think you're a big Trekkie even still.
Yeah, I think it's something similar. I think the Next Generation started the year I was born, so it was still like live on TV, because I remember being like maybe 5 or 6 and my dad sitting me down and going like, "You're going to watch this, you're going to enjoy it." And like some of it might have gone over my head, but I'm still a big Star Trek fan these days.
Forced into the fandom.
Yes, we were never a Star Wars household. I didn't get to that until I was almost an adult, so it doesn't have quite the same appeal to me, but I'll always go back to Star Trek.
Chloe, when do you remember first seeing Star Trek?
Oh, I don't know. Probably the movies, because, I don't know, we never watched the TV shows, and I always thought Star Trek was kind of boring, except for the movies.
I will say my exposure to Star Trek was also the films, but my parents did watch Next Generation, but I never really invested into the series.
No, I always remember it being a weird trend in the UK that you always got Star Trek movies on at Christmas. It was the strangest sort of...
That is a wonderful Christmas.
Yeah.
Spaceships are great ornaments, I gotta say. You probably sell them as models. Hang them on your tree.
Exactly. So I know we touched a little bit very quickly on, Chloe, you did a Jurassic Park comics. So what was that like?
Where I wrote most of the script, and he got half the credit, but I got all the money anyway.
Oh, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I'm happy to share credit, but hand over all the money. She did all the hard work,
yeah.
and the whole script process was pretty amazing because Chloe nailed it. Those scripts were changed very, very little between the time she wrote them and the time we handed them in.
And
Yeah, I'm a lifelong comic book reader and Jurassic Park fans. This worked out very well for me.
Oh,
and I think Jurassic World actually kind of swiped some of my ideas about
no.
Raptors. We were both clearly thinking in the same direction. I don't think I actually read my comic. Velociraptors are cool.
They own everything. You work for them and it's work for hire. And the studio owns everything.
That's true. It's theirs and never yours. But I suppose your name will always be associated with it. So I suppose that's something.
You know, they're fun to watch. The movies, I've actually enjoyed watching some of the later movies. The first one, of course, was Major. And I had an insight into that, as did Chloe back when she was quite a young thing. We woke her up one time as we were visiting the Tippett shop about 1988 or so. And she woke up to this rather cramped studio, which is where Phil Tippett was at that time. And she woke up to a giant red scorpion, which was going to be repaired and replaced on the set of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you remember all of that. But,
oh, no.
But then we hung out. I'd been friends with Phil since we were teenagers and watched the process of how he was going to be doing Jurassic Park in stop motion, and then watched the rather abrupt transition to computer graphics, which caught everybody by shock and surprise.
Yes, this is Phil Tippett, one of the special effects guys. He did the animation in Empire Strikes Back and stuff too.
Yeah.
Oh, so all the practical effects. Very good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And just while we're on the topic of comics, Chloe, have you read the Halo comics, just out of curiosity?
I read some of them a long time ago. I kind of got out of reading Halo stuff, so I haven't been caught up lately. I think I just read the anthology comic that had the Mobius book and all their stuff.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of hit and miss. I was just kind of curious. They kind of range between good and not so good.
Comics in general. So.
Yeah, that's true. Also, it's kind of like an inside joke between, especially myself and Aaron, about nanotech. And what caught my eye is that you're credited, Greg, as being the first person to ever write about nanotechnology in your novel Blood Music.
Yeah, Blood Music was biological nanotech. It was soft and squishy rather than silicon-based. Eric Drexler was the man who created nanotechnology. He's a science fiction reader. And we met him many times, and quite impressed by his work on Engines of Creation. But Blood Music came out before Engines of Creation.
So you won.
Kind of laid people's ideas about what nanotechnology could actually do. And it turns out, of course, that we are nanotechnological engines. Proteins are very small machines. So that was in Blood Music, which was great fun to research and write.
Again, we just said in the way we joke, because especially in Halo 4, that was around the time, which is interesting, given your ties to that game, where Halo started talking about nanotech and using it as a way of a get-out-of-jail-free card of why something could happen. It was like, oh, because nanotechnology allowed it to happen, and everyone was like, oh, great. Yeah, it's that wonderful magic wand that you can wave over a sci-fi universe and something will happen.
It's now being taken up by all the Marvel movies, nanotech on
totally.
the internet suit and everything else. It's just magic, right?
You can do what you needed to do. So, going again onto the games. Chloe, I'm imagining you're the gamer of the family, given that some of the previous kind of quotes and stuff had Greg saying you were very influential in showing him this universe in Halo.
Oh, I mean, my sister plays lots of games too. I'm the first-person shooter fan of the family, definitely. I played Halo. I used to have LAN parties back in high school when the Xbox came out, so I'm playing Halo for a really long time.
Awesome. You're one of those cool kids who got one of those LAN parties.
Oh, yeah. Used to sit in the basement and hook up 2 Xboxes with Ethernet cables and have 2 TVs in 2 separate rooms so we couldn't look at each other's screens,
Oh, I'm glad you said 2, because LAN parties in my head, especially in America, are like halls of people and just bodies. And when I used to play games, we could barely get 4 people together. So I did have 2 Xboxes connected and did exactly what you did. So I'm glad now that I can think that I had a LAN party once.
No, you did. I was on the same level as well.
Yeah.
I think you got through all the games, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I also used to be... I'm still pretty good at multiplayer every time I pick it up. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. All the skills are still there, and I just don't know how to shoot stuff.
That's excellent, because I suck, but I love them. So you're fully caught up then? You're up at Halo 5 and everything?
Yeah, I didn't play any of the side games, but all the mainline games.
They had a brief foray into tablet games and stuff and shooters. I think Aaron likes them. I never really.
Like is a strong word, David.
Like is you played it. You played them both, didn't you?
I did play both the iPad games, but the less said about them, the better.
Not important additions to the Halo canon?
No, they did not bring much to the table.
So, Greg, I also noticed that you are credited as being a consultant, especially on a range of different things that are fascinating. But just to stay focused on where we're at, you are credited as being an advisor to Microsoft, specifically the game Xbox division. Was that Halo 4, or was there other things that you were consulted on?
No, it was a project that never quite got off the ground.
Oh, that's okay.
Involving space elevator type operations, and it was fascinating to work with these guys because some of the games they had worked on, I was a big fan of.
Yeah, I think it was some of the same people that worked on Crimson Skies, if I recall correctly, which is a classic Xbox game.
Yes, it was. It was an amazing Xbox game. I think it was the first thing I ever played on Xbox Live. I think it was on a demo booth in a store. So it was cool. Those space elevators, that's cool.
Just we had some meetings, and then
that's right. Chloe was there too. She had some of her first meetings were on that, and she backed me up on my knowledge of games there.
So Chloe, did you just tag along and get access to all this amazing stuff way before maybe you should have?
I got story input though, so I got to leave my mark on the Halo universe.
Dude, that is amazing.
When we had our first breakfast with the 343 guys, we were walking around outside waiting to get into this pretty nice breakfast restaurant in Seattle. And Chloe looks at me and says, "You're human. Your Forerunner needs a human sidekick." And we went in and pitched it to Frank, and Frank says, "No, I'm not sure that would work." And then suddenly his eyes lit up and he says, "Wait, I know who that human becomes."
Just like that.
Yeah, so that human sidekick character became 343 Guilty Spark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorite Halo characters, so I'm glad I could bring him that all.
Oh my god, I love you so much. None of these guys like Guilty Spark, and I'm just like, what?
Oh, he's so good.
He's adorable.
Well, we weren't sure. Chloe certainly wasn't sure that was where it was going, but certainly the Forerunner needed a human sidekick, and that kind of established the entire arc of the novels.
Yeah, and I also got to force them to wrap up a bunch of dialogue, a bunch of Guilty Sparks dialogue from Halo 1 from the library where you're just walking around being curious.
Yeah.
So I made them resolve all that stuff. Even though he kind of, after thousands of years of just, being by himself. And so it's all really distorted, but he does actually resolve all the stuff back in his human days and back in his early shell days that he did in the first Halo game.
So what was very cool is the whole personality stretch and everything kind of becomes like an Ibsen play. It's it really was fun working in this universe and allowing all of these massive characters, the two Didacs and all that stuff to come and go in their evolution, and also just to lay out the Forerunners and their culture, but also the precursors. And there were many stories to be told about that, but to be given the freedom to mess around in this massive universe was great fun for me and for Chloe as well.
Well, you just got to make up stuff out of whole cloth, because this was all like uncharted territory.
We had to, we had some points on the board there where you have things that are in the games, some dialogue and so on, and you got to match that, but it wasn't too hard. And these guys, the 343 folks, were very, very tolerant. I'd send them a note off saying, "Is it okay if we do this?" And say, "Yeah, that could work," and we just move on. However, when it came to the third volume, they were working on the game, and as they're working on the game, and we're approaching the end of the third volume, I'm hoping to have the freedom in the last few chapters to do what I want to do. And they said, "No, we're if we allow you to have that freedom, we'll have to change the game because it's already locked in." And at that point, the publisher really wasn't quite understanding what's going on, and I tried to explain it. It's like working on a movie. You they will allow the writer to be creative in the beginning, but when the script is locked in, you don't want the writer to be endlessly creative.
Yeah, once they got the models built,
Yeah, and the actors and all that stuff, and once they are paid for it and doing all the CGI, that's probably, I don't know how much it costs. How much do you think it costs?
Way too much.
About $150
Way too much.
is my guess for what a game costs like that to put it together. That's just a crude guess. I don't have any inside information there at all. But if it's $150 million, they're not going to want me to mess around with it.
Sure enough. I mean, okay, we've been dancing around it a bit, so let's just dive in. You guys got together and had access to this amazing franchise. So where did it begin? I know you touched on there was been talks and discussions. So was it, because I found two were kind of things based on different kind of interviews and stuff you'd given in the past. So I don't want to hold you to things you said like 6 or 7 years ago and ask you to remember them. But were you approached and asked to do a story, or did it go the other way around? Did Chloe push you in knowing that you were a writer, that you would like this franchise?
They approached me, and apparently some of the 343 people had read a novel I wrote called City at the End of Time. And what I hear is that after they read that book, they says, "I think this guy could do the Halo stories, the Forerunner thing," which was kind of perilous because not only was Microsoft taking over, but the game was coming up, and they had to figure this was going to be their first big game. So playing around this way is kind of courageous or foolish. I'm not sure which. But that's when they brought us in for meetings, and we started realizing this could be fun. And Chloe and I attended that first breakfast, and then we got to go out to the studio. Did you ever go out to the studio?
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah, and to see what they were doing, and a get together for luncheons and all that kind of stuff. And we met a lot of the people involved, and they were very impressive. And it really was like working on a major motion picture.
That's so cool. And Chloe, I imagine it was totally amazing.
I got to see sneak preview Halo 4 stuff in progress. Didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, we couldn't tell anybody, So the books had to be our event to get out to the audience there. And I got to say, meeting the Halo fans was also astonishing. They were energetic, they were young quite often, and they were very enthusiastic. And as we promoted the books, we started meeting people who kept showing up with different levels of enthusiasm, and I'd remember them from one Emerald City Comic-Con to another. And as we're signing books, I'd point up and say, "I know you're so-and-so," and they just light up with the enthusiasm. They just love these games, and they love meeting the people who are helping create them.
So, yeah, that sounds nuts. Just to be able to come in, and like you said, you had that level of freedom, and it was obviously, they had the idea that they wanted a Forerunner trilogy. Was it always a trilogy they had in their heads?
It was contracted as a trilogy, and that third book, I had the freedom up for the first half, and then suddenly they locked me down. So I had to learn how to do that. It's like being on a scripting mission, You have to take what we've got and put it back into the book. And I said, okay, well, I can do that. I've done scripts.
All right, so it came back at you. That's interesting. Because I was going to ask, because I noticed the dates that the books were 2011, 2012, 2013. And in the middle there was Halo 4 was, I think, scheduled.
Yeah, they were already working by the time we started writing, so we just kind of started incorporating stuff we put in the books into the game.
We would
that's so cool.
share material with them and characters. And what I find particularly amazing is the Didact character, which was only lightly touched on in the original Halo stories. I suddenly realized I could have great fun because we didn't have a physical description of the Didact. Well, what we call in the final book, the Didact, the original Didact. One of our characters, spoiler alert here, becomes another version of the Didact as he matures. And that's the ISO Didact.
Yes, we need to thank you for breaking brains all across the Halo universe. As for even today, we need to explain to each other which Didact it was.
Yeah. But in the Halo 4, it was the Didact who was really cutting loose and coming back and really wrecking havoc. And that was a fascinating thing to watch my character, as I described it in the book, being given life, animation and voice and all that stuff. It was great fun.
Yeah, and then you got to shoot him.
You got to, quote unquote, kill him. That's awesome. I didn't realize that it was that much of a give and take or back and forward, I suppose, between you and the team. And the Didact and ISO Didact is one of the, the Didact is like one of the most interesting and definitely one of the best kind of antagonists to any game we've kind of had. So I imagine that was awesome to see that come to life and have a voice actor who was amazing and has some amazing quotes and dialogue and stuff. Were you involved in any of the dialogue for the game?
Some of it was actually taken from my novel, and I watched some of the voice actors actually reading the passage that would be between the Life Worker and the Didact.
Yeah, they had all the cutscenes from the terminals in Halo 4, if I recall correctly, that were drawn from your books.
Yeah.
The Lord of Admirals and the Tribe and all that.
Right.
That was great to see.
Watching them put that together, again, it was like watching a movie being made.
Had you ever had any experience with like that before? Was this your one and only kind of foray to this kind of work?
I had a Twilight Zone episode done in '85 based on one of my short stories called The Dead Run.
Oh, excellent.
I got to go up to L.A. My friend Alan Brennert was a story editor on Twilight Zone, and he picked up on the story and got it into production. And I was able to go up there and watch them putting the set together, and actors and Steve Railsback and other great actors, watching them get ready to film the scenes and so on, and got up to some of the location shooting, and that was great fun. But also, we got to watch the construction of Hell on a soundstage. Hell was like an apartment complex, so it was quite something.
I think that was also, if not Brent Spiner's first screen role, one of his first screen roles.
Yeah, he shows
very
up
briefly.
Shows up in the back of a truck.
Oh, that was Brett Spinner. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess talking about different franchises and stuff. So what I kind of wanted to ask you, and I hadn't got a chance to ask any other authors we've ever had a chance to meet. You've written, obviously, in other franchises and have written sci-fi for many years before you came along and got a chance at Halo. I wanted to ask, what did that look like when you came? And you've obviously been very well known for what you do, and then you're given something that's pre-established. How did that compare? What did you make of the Halo universe when it was given to you? Well,
it's classic science fiction, so I fell right into it. It was something, that I had been reading since I was a teenager. Lots of these books. I remember reading about Ringworlds way back when with Larry Niven's novels, and just I get to mess with a Ringworld. That'll be fun. The interesting thing is, I hear that there are other Halo products that are using books and so on that are using storylines based on my books, and that's cool. When I wrote a Star Wars book, turned out without my knowledge that 17 other books used the world I created for my Star Wars. The Rogue Planet was used in 17 later, I think 17
Yeah, it
later.
ended up being how they beat the Yuuzhan Vong, I think.
Yeah.
So, now that's all not canon anymore.
Yes, it's all gone.
Aww.
So I created all these extra novels, and it's not canon anymore. But they could do well by bringing some of that plot line back.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I did get a chance to talk to one or two other writers who had the same experience you did, where they created a book and then had it erased. How did you feel about that? Did you mind?
There's nothing I control about it. I mean,
yeah.
I wrote a good book, and it's been read by people, and they still go back. A lot of people still go back and read the non-canonical books and enjoy them just as much, if not more.
The hullabaloo about it was almost like they weren't going out and taking the book away from you and burning it. It's still a good book. It still exists.
It's many, many copies out there. In fact, that's how I ruined my autograph, was signing all those Star Wars books.
You ruined it.
Yeah, there was going to, and again, the fans, the kids, the young readers, but also the older readers are amazing in these franchises. They just love these books, and you got to give them honor and credit here that they're among the most enthusiastic and sometimes the most knowledgeable. And I think of the groups that I dealt with, the Halo fans are still among the most knowledgeable and the most enthusiastic. And what astonished me about what Chloe and I put together is they approved of it. And this was such a relief when we started getting back Halo Encyclopedia comments and questions and so on. And a lot of fans.
Oh, I'm sure you were berated. And
I did not hear a negative word, but I wasn't looking for it either. So, but really, they accepted it, and it became part of canon almost immediately. As soon as the first book came out, suddenly it was part of Halo canon. And I was getting asked questions up until a few months ago. Well, do you remember what goes on here? And it's like they're trying to score points with their social group, and I don't remember it anymore. I'm not the one to go to.
We don't remember either, so it's fine. That's why we're constantly going back to the different websites and reminding each other stuff. That's why we create these groups. They're like support groups, just to remind yourselves of different bits. So I did want to ask, you've kind of touched on it already, but your piece of the Halo universe is truly unique. Now, other authors have gone back and kind of continued, but your trilogy, as it were, or maybe I'm going to count Rebirth as well. So all those 4 pieces of fiction are like totally set apart and unique compared to like every other kind of book in Halo and stuff like that. What was it like? Obviously, you were going in with the origins, and I'm kind of asking kind of Chloe this more so because she would have been familiar with the games and the story before you were doing any of this. What was it kind of like being told you get to do everything from the start? You get to create everything, you get to do the origins, and even the crazy origins of humanity was amazing. Seeing that happen. So what was that like?
Well, like this is all the deep backstory stuff that I think every Halo fan was waiting for.
Yes.
So I don't know. I like being a part of that and like finally getting to actually, answer all those questions that I had as a Halo fan playing Halo 1 for the first time back in the day.
A lot of Halo fans, at least according to what we've heard, really kind of wanted that reserved for their own playground. And they came up with the theories and came up with sketches and designs for the Forerunners and everything, which were looking kind of elfin in their conceptions. And so when we transformed that, turned it upside down, and kind of bulked them out, there was a little concern, 343, that we had all these fans who were really critical at times. And suddenly they were on our side. It was a miracle. It was just a miracle of enthusiasm and love, and the characterizations fell into place, and suddenly the game started to take shape. Number 4 started to really come alive in its own background and history.
That is something, an excellent point that I didn't really realize at the time, and I think everyone kind of knows of it now in terms of like in the Halo circles, that when I played the game, I didn't know about your books. Well, I knew of them, but I don't think I'd ever read them. And I read the trilogy after I read Halo 4 and went back to play Halo 4. And I don't think there's been a situation like this before where your books make that game so much more better. And obviously it shows from the way that they were written, and obviously you were writing it together and there was collaboration going on. And everyone knows now that you read that trilogy before you go in, because it sets up these amazing characters in the game so much better. Obviously a game can't do everything. But the books are obviously hundreds of pages long of backstory and lore.
You got to credit the game makers there, because they...
No, you get the credit. You get the credit.
I appreciate the credit here, but we got to talk about 343, and the whole studio and everybody involved was very supportive, but they really knew how to do this. I mean, they were experts at what they did, and watching that organization get its work done and produce a really lovely product was astonishing.
And obviously getting Chloe, you got your bits involved as well, and that's cool. That's definitely going to be cool. Know that you wrote that. You did that.
That one little short story there.
What we hear and what I've seen is apparently there's a new publisher for these books. So they're coming out in substantially similar but different publishing editions. And so the books continue. I mean, they're going on. And I guess they're not out of canon now.
No, not at all. And that's what one of the later questions going to say is that your stories have become more relevant even today than, okay, they were always relevant back then, but when they go quiet and, the games move on and stuff and time goes on, the 343 still go back to your books, your stories, and they're still introducing new pieces and links to it. So, like, it's not surprising at all that it's getting... Is it a reprint? I'm not sure, but if it's a new publisher or how that kind of works, but I'm not surprised at all.
It looks substantially the same covers and everything, but they're coming out of Simon & Schuster now.
Oh, that's right, yeah. A lot of the books would be. So I guess when you came into the franchise and you got a list, I mean... The Halo Bible is known as is a thing. when you got access to kind of all this information and all that kind of stuff, was there anything that stood out to you? Something that you maybe didn't like about the franchise, or the way that they had maybe designed a piece of technology that didn't make sense? Did anything stand out to you, really?
No, I don't recall being offended by their science fiction ideas, because they were classic science fiction readers. They kind of knew how to make this military SF game read like science fiction and or play like science fiction. And there's some stuff, in terms of scale and anti-gravity and all that stuff, which you could quibble with, but that's pretty true of nearly all the media adaptations. But what they were doing was they created a universe, a world that players love to play in. And to do that with the technology and everything introduced a lot of people to science fictional ideas they might not have encountered otherwise. And they did it with a fair amount of sophistication, so I have no complaints.
I kind of wanted to ask as well, you introduced the, I'm going to mess up their name, but they're called the Prophets in the game, and they're Sansayum. They're like the other race that were kind of allies with humans at one stage when they were fighting the war, but I thought that very fascinating because they were like the enemies in the actual games, and their ancient form was a partnership with ancient humanity. So I really liked that that kind of introduction, and was very surprised to see them appear as like in their ancient form. Thought that was a very nice touch.
I had great fun with the precursors too, of which almost was known. And I look back to a cover art that I had seen when I was a teenager, based on a John Brunner book. That I took that cover, which I believe was an Imschwaller cover, and looked at this monstrous creature being dragged on a palanquin over hundreds of human bodies as he's, radiating his psychic energy. And I said, oh my God, how is that not the precursor?
Yeah, I think the original description for the trap precursor was that it was Totoro with a sea scorpion for a head.
Yeah. And I had to provide sketches to the artists for them to figure that out. And I'm not sure how much they actually used it, but it was really fun. And going back to that cover art, and Imschwaller and Brunner his novel was called The Atlantic Abomination, and I think fans should look that up and possibly read it.
And that would sets up the precursor imagery in your head was from this novel.
Yeah, I reduced the size a little bit, but the story is about an alien being found at the bottom of a giant trench, then brought up, and it's got psychic powers. It's still alive. And the origin of the Didact and the Cryptum was also from another project. It was from Thea von Harbou and Fritz Lang's story, The Indian Tomb. The Indian Tomb was about a fellow who's going to become a kind of a superhero who is self-mummified through meditation and is pulled up out of the ground and revived over a long period of time and becomes this psychic super powerhouse. It's a silent movie from 1919, I think, or 1920. And it's well worth watching. It's an incredible, but that's kind of where I pulled the idea for the Didact and the Cryptum and his coming in and out of history at that point. Is I kind of thought, okay, this is pretty cool. So that's an old silent movie that influences me as well.
So your influences come from all over.
When you're desperate, you take where you can.
Steal stuff.
Yeah, you take it, but you also give credit. And as I think the one thing about the Halo universe is there's a lot of credit to be passed around. It's not only in the middle of science fiction culture, and it dominates in some cases, but it's pretty cool.
I was going to ask about the Halo 4, but you've kind of already really touched already, mostly upon you're great at this. You answered all the questions before I even got a chance to ask them. But some of the some of those characters and some of the places you go, there's some real big standouts. The precursor planet where that was found, Shuram Hakor, that was an awesome, mentally difficult thing to conceive of. That was so cool. I mean, I loved that setup and that. I mean, people go back to these books and these descriptions even today to kind of try and wrap when they're talking about things happening now to kind of get their head around it. I mean, there's some great sections that are always worth going back to.
Thank you.
I just thought that was amazing. And the same with Mithrillian, the former home, the center of their government. It's kind of like, it's not really a planet, I guess. It's a big space station, I guess is what I'm going to call it.
It's an artificial construct, yeah.
There we go, yeah.
I've always loved artificial constructs.
I don't know if you saw them. There was a book that came out a year or two called Halo Mythos that had it was like a start and finish of the Halo timeline, and it covered a lot of your stuff. And We also, for the first time, got to see a lot of those things conceptualized in art and actually in print. We
I'll
could
look
see
that up.
That's cool. I haven't seen that.
It's definitely worth looking at. It's just a one standalone kind of art book that gives a lot of descriptions, but it shows these kind of concepts and what the Mythrilian actually looked like, and that was great for me because my simple brain couldn't really comprehend some of the things.
I'm on a page with David. I think your novels were the first time I had to sit down and like scour the internet and go, I have absolutely no idea what this looks like. My brain just doesn't function that way. And I was just like hunting around looking for drawings and sketches going like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's just in my head. I think the way I always described your novels in the Halo universe is yours feel like proper grown-up sci-fi. And I feel like the rest of the time I'm just reading about the soldiers shooting each other. And it's something I've always enjoyed about them.
That's very difficult for the writers to put together, is to create compelling novels out of what amounts to first-person shooters. And I got to give credit to my friends, the writers here, for managing that for so many years. And I got to say that the freedom I was given is kind of contrary to what they had to face, which was to fit into character arcs and so on, and make it all work and make it a good story. So going back to, was Eric Nyland one of the first?
Yeah, he wrote The Fall of Reach. That was the first novel.
Yeah, and the work that they had to go through allows me to do what I did.
Well, that's definitely something I want to ask. In the same way Aaron says, your style of writing is completely different, obviously, than anything else that we had coming up to that, and even since, it's kind of unique. You have your own style, and certainly a sense of scale that is unlike anything. So I think Halo was always like that, where you were obviously the small first-person guy on this massive ring world, and your books introduce a scale greater than that again over what we were used to as a player in the game. Something that I did struggle with, definitely with because I don't think I hadn't read any sci-fi like this before, and it was definitely something I struggled with. So were you at all worried with what that was like, knowing that your style was very different? I know you were approached deliberately because of how you write, but were you at all worried with how that would be received, that the readers of the books, like the reader base as it were, would be used to something very different?
I wasn't the one taking the risk. I feel
True.
very reassured that these guys trusted me, or at least gave me some faith. I don't know whether they drank a lot off hours or not, but they were really helpful and giving me that sense of freedom, as I say, until the game got going. You know, what you have to do is, I think if you want to go back to their mindset, you want to take a look at some of my other books, like Eon or City at the End of Time. And City at the End of Time is a very strange book set 100 trillion years in the future. I've often thought, as I look at the Halo universe, that it's kind of part of the Foundation universe in some respects. No, I'm sorry. It was a Star Wars universe that always seemed to be part of the Foundation universe, some part of Isaac Asimov's vast quadrillion population in the galaxy, 100 billion stars and so on. That the whole Star Wars saga could be encompassed in that, because Star Wars to me seemed like a lot like a Foundation story. But when I wrote the Halo books, not only was I allowed to play with Larry Niven's Ring Worlds and Ian Banks's Ring Worlds, but to go into the limitations they had made and just have fun, to think, okay, I wanna push a moon through a ring world. What'll happen if you do that?
That's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, and you think about it in terms of the way gravity works and engineering and so on, and that's fun to imagine.
And was that difficult to conceptualize when you came up with these grand ideas, like these huge astronomical bodies interacting with each other?
Well, it's no more difficult than writing about characters. So, characters are as complicated in a story as anything in the landscape. When you put them on a landscape like this, that affects the way they're characterized. And that's one of the typical things you have to do when writing science fiction, is adjust your characters to the worlds they occupy. Not just the worlds, but the cultures and the languages and all that sort of stuff. And that's great fun, but it's also not easy. And to trust someone to do this with your baby has got to be kind of a rough go at times.
I'm sure it got easier with the book's release and the reception and stuff, that it helped build momentum.
Yeah, I think they were breathing a sigh of relief by the time number 2 was acceptable. And then when number 3 came out and seemed to be acceptable, and that's, part of that fits into the game, that was a great sigh of relief. But we are still dealing with 100,000 years before.
And that's an excellent segue into your characters. So you have some obviously truly unique moments and unique characters that you've created. Did you have one that was the most fun to write or the most challenging?
Orin Stellar, because he goes through a transition to become a mature Forerunner. And to think of the transitions between different kinds of Forerunners, male and female, and the males, and the society the families you would have, and the extended families, that was not easy. But also, it wasn't impossible, because in the novel Eon, I was dealing with a far future world with similar cultures, different family structures, and different shapes of beings in a high-tech world. You could be what you wanted to be. If you wanted to be completely artificial, or male, or female, or whatever, you could change that. And so they addressed each other as Ser, S-E-R, rather than the sexual pronouns. And that kind of prepared me. That bent my brain back in 1984, 85, to get in shape for what was going on with other science fiction novels. And I wrote a couple of sequels, which explored backwards and forwards from Eon. When I wrote City at the End of Time, it was even stranger, because we're dealing with a universe that is so very, very, very old that the laws of physics are starting to fall apart. And the weirdness beyond the city of the landscape, it comes to me. I was influenced by William Hope Hodgson and The Nightland, and I just kind of wanted to expand that and take his impulse. And Hodgson was an amazing writer. He was an Irish writer who wrote stories like The House on the Borderland, which is one of my favorites to this day, and then very difficult books like The Nightland, which is quite a substantial piece of visionary writing. He died in World War I. He was killed at Ypres in a battle in France. And so, if we take a look at the origin stories for these fantasy things, you can run back and forth. And I'm going to get off on the track here unless you pull me back in. But
no, you keep going. You're doing great.
Tolkien was in World War I. That influenced, I think, he may not have agreed, but I think that influenced his vision of Mordor. Is the searchlight and all that stuff kind of reminds us of being in the trenches in World War I. And there's a movie out now. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
The new one, yeah, that looks quite interesting.
Yeah. Hodgson, on the other hand, predated World War I with The Nightland. He anticipated the trenches with The Nightland. And The Nightland, if you read his Nightland itself, is kind of a precursor to Mordor, but also to what they saw in the trenches at World War I. And it's chilling. It's utterly terrifying. And to go with that and play with it was another privilege, because his stories are not only Lovecraftian, but kind of Stapledonian. And I wonder, in fact, if Tolkien had read, before he went into the war, if he had read The Nightland.
Those things the way you just listen to you speak for the last 20 minutes is great to see all these influences, and I can see them. They're there to see the way that you've placed these characters and these situations. I did want to ask about the ISO and Eurodidactic, where he came from, but you've kind of really touched on that already, that I've seen. That's probably one of the most unique character arcs, I think, ever, to see two of the same character essentially be created and that be different at the same time, and their stories and where they go is fascinating.
Well, creating confusion among the readers is one way to avoid criticism. But in fact, the isodidact is imprinted by the erdidact, and so that's why he's going to grow up to become a kind of a mockery of the erdidact.
Chloe, were you involved in any of these crazy shenanigans? Did he consult you and say...
That was all him.
That was all him. He takes all the blame, does he?
Yeah, I take the blame. But I did run it past her, and I ran it past 343 folks, and so they approved, and they were either crazy or brilliant. I'm not sure which.
It worked out in the end, so we can say brilliant. The peer review. So, Chloe and Krista, this is now your time to shine, because we have to talk about 343 Guilty Spark. I know you touched upon it on the start, but this character and Jokos, the connection, the link, the where it goes, and how relevant it is right now is awesome. Go, Krista, go.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Halo Renegades that just came out. Slight spoilers. But that really builds on kind of the universe. It actually builds directly on kind of how things ended up at the end of Silentium and Rebirth. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And it's in modern times. It's like 2559. So it's very strange.
Sounds like they're having fun with it, though. That's cool.
Yeah. But going through Primordium, it was just the moment you find out who Chakas is something that is quite dear to my heart.
Well, we got to blame the 343 people and Frank in particular.
I think that was Frankie's brainchild. Was, hey, what if we make him into 343? And I was like, yes, go for it.
That was right there in the first minutes of breakfast. You know, we pitched the notion of a human sidekick, and suddenly Frank was on it, and he did that, and that was what kind of, as I say, structured the entire series.
Because 343 is such a strange, out-of-place character through the games, it really cemented his place in the universe, at least for me and a lot of fans. So it was really interesting to kind of see his progression through the series, and also he complemented Bornstellar in such an interesting way, like him and Riser and Bornstellar, and especially in Cryptum, it was such an interesting trio to kind of learn from and kind of delve into the universe.
Well, I had fun doing it because I was able to play off my anthropological stuff, and anthropology has really become interesting in the last. It's always been interesting, but especially interesting in the last 40 years. And when you see the creation of the mix of different species. I was kind of messing around with these ideas when I was writing Darwin's Radio and Darwin's Children, and realized that some of this anthropology I had was starting to really kind of bear fruit 100,000 years ago. What was the tango like for human species together back then? And the whole idea of the Floresians, Flores Islanders, being 3 feet tall. And anthropologists are having a very hard time with these fossils, making sense of them, and some of them were saying, well, they're a separate kind of humanity. And I says, oh, this is a gang boss here. A 3 foot tall guy is wonderful to work with, and so we'll just do that, and he'll be in charge of the gang.
So you made your own hobbits. I love it.
And they even go on an adventure.
That's right.
We had a fellowship.
Yep.
There were rings involved.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Well,
You copied and pasted this, didn't you?
I don't know how much you're fans of anthropology, but the very large apes, Gigantopithecus, were actually more like orangutans, not gorillas. And so one of the characters in the novel is a Gigantopithecus with reddish fur and 10 feet tall. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. These are amazing creatures. Amazing beings.
The things you created were pretty amazing, to be fair. And where these character arc stories, like I said, I wanted to task Chris that brought them in. Halo Renegades is one of the most recent Halo books that came out by Kelly Gay, and she takes up the story of Chocolates in 343, and he kind of evolves again and becomes a new character and becomes totally more relevant again. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if that's why you're seeing a resurgence of your own books, that people going back to see the origins of this character has now suddenly become so much more important.
Yeah. So Chloe will read it, and I'll take a look at it, and we'll have fun with it. But I appreciate that kind of expansion, because that's what I was having fun doing.
Again, there's also been some other stories that even wrap up Bornstellar's story again. So there's one like uncredited story, which is kind of unusual. I'm kind of hoping it was maybe you guys, I don't know. So they did like a Halo Fractures, which is like an anthology of little short stories. And the very last book in that talks about Bornstellar's kind of where he goes. It takes place on series kind of how he kind of dies. This kind of wraps up his story. And there's another story called Promises to Keep by Christy Golden, who also kind of, there's a child and it's a bit more of a story there. So I just wanted to ask if you were aware of those things, or just
No, but I'll have to look it up. I'm very pleased that they're taking and running with it.
Yeah, I just looked that up. I don't know. I guess the Fracture story has Growth Through Trial of Change, who's like the character I created for Rebirth.
Yeah?
I don't know. I need to check that out because I like her, and I didn't know that somebody else would actually pick her up and do something with her.
Yeah, it's definitely worth going to take up. So again, that's an excellent little segue there, Chloe, into Halo Rebirth. So can you tell me a little bit more about this? Because it was something I found very late. I think it was Krista or Oren. It was one of you guys who actually told me about it, because I'd never heard of it before. Because I'm on a little island in a little bubble on the other side of the planet. So this was a unique little story that came out in a unique way. So can you talk to me about, like, where did this happen, how, when?
Yeah, I don't really remember how it came to be exactly. I don't know. They tapped me to write that, and Greg co-wrote some of that with me. So it's the story that's set like after the trilogy, after the Halos are fired and the life workers have gathered up, all the sentient beings in the universe, and they're storing them on Installation 0 to keep them out of the path of the super weapon. So just sort of like about, winding down the galaxy. Like, they just killed all life in the galaxy. They're going to rebuild it eventually, but it's not going to be the same for thousands and thousands of years, and everything's just going silent. And it's like they're having basically this funeral for what was and celebrating what is to become. So I don't know, it's kind of a weird, like very mournful story when I was writing it for me.
And she did the major story, and I went back and did a revision on it, and then had fun in the studio reading it out loud. And it's Chloe has got the chops to deliver that kind of tale, and also put the imagination into it. And
also, I think like Halo is, it's a game about, I don't know, everyone's like, basically Halo is literally a game about breaking circles, like both in the sense of it's constantly, and in the sense of that it's this galactic cycle of war and murder that's been going on for the entire history of the galaxy and just never stops. So Rebirth is kind of a nice, like, side vision of that world where everyone gets along and everyone can just, sit by the bonfire and have a nice party of all different species.
Yeah.
Yay!
It's not going to last, but it's nice to think about.
Chloe set this up as a kind of a dessert phase for the books, is a kind of a pleasant idyll at the end of the books.
And can you tell us about the format? Because it was released quite unusually, where it was an audio only.
Yeah, that was their decision. It was going to be like a promo for the books where you had to like get different copies of the third book to get the codes that would unlock it online or something like that.
Well, this was a plan that I had thought of, that if you put a secret message into different editions of the novels, and fans would find that, they could go for unlocking gameplay. That turned out to be a little difficult to do, games being so expensive to make. So what Tor decided was that they would turn this into a short story. And I think it ended up in some of the trade paperback editions as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so when they put the trade paperbacks out, the stories were included, and Chloe got credit for that. But also, when I was reading this, I was harking back to what they were talking about when they were reading the actual books. And I'm going to forget the name of the voice actor who reads the Halo Forerunner books, but he was actually the voice of Guilty Spark.
That was Tim Dabido?
Yes, absolutely. And we met him at Emerald City Comic Con, and I suggested, if you want to read those books, and I don't know if they actually did this or not, but if you want to read those books, when you take Chakas over into his transition to 343, you could go into your voice for the game.
Yeah, they do that in the second book, yeah, because when he does the audio for that, I read it originally and then I got the audiobooks and gave it a listen. And at the moment he starts to sort of become 343, they do add the voice filters and modulation, and he goes full Guilty Spark. It's fantastic to listen to.
Yeah, and that's got to be a great thrill to catch on to that, what's going on. That's difficult to do in text, but the actors could certainly pull it off.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think if you'd come to it as an audiobook the first time round, I think he does such a good job with the narration the entire time that you never once put two and two together and realise who he is until the modulation kicks in. So it's a great reveal.
I love that. I'm glad they were able to run with that.
And obviously, when we have characters like this that have such unique and identifiable voices, it's hard not to hear them when you're reading the books. So it's always great to see things like that. I mean, I know Aaron's the big audio book guy. What we call fake books, myself and Krista, but we love when we're reading the paperbacks. It's great to hear an identifiable voice like that.
Well, again, it's the 343 people casting and doing all this stuff, and this is just reminds me that it's kind of the golden age of multimedia and series and all that sort of thing in terms of movies and games. It's quite amazing what's going on in show business with all these venues.
We're kind of, I think, almost done. I have a few questions from the community and any of the guys in the chat that want to ask anything else, or sorry, the guys on the call, and then we'll kind of let you guys go. So we had a question from Redacted. You kind of touched it already, but he wanted to know how much of the Forerunner Trilogy came from the Halo Bible as opposed to being made by yourself when you were in the process of writing the book.
Interesting question. The Halo Bible, in some cases, was not explicit about this and was going to be amended clearly. So I did not spend a lot of time looking up things in the Halo Bible. I would go to the game creators and make sure they would allow me to change things. A lot of what's in the Halo Bible gets changed, the version that I have at any rate. I'm
sure it's in constant flux. Given, like you said, the expense around making a game, they need to be flexible on everything that's around that. Matt asks, what did it feel like having made one of the most important pieces of lore to date in the Halo universe? So this is just a bit of fan love, just to let you know.
It was my privilege to work with you guys. The fans were really, the response of the fans was supportive in such an amazing way. That kind of kept us going through to the volume 3.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I used to be on halo.bungie.org as a teenager, so like feels
So that must have been a great feeling, Chloe, just being like, yeah, I wrote this. My dad wrote this. What are you going to do? You're going to argue with me?
Yeah, now I can impress people.
Well, since Chloe was my reference here in a lot of these cases, she's responsible too.
Young Animus asks them, you were at the helm of creating a story which by extension formed the Halo universe we love today. Did you ever think about the importance of surrounding the trilogy and what it would mean for fans seeing their fandom's literal creation? I guess he's kind of asking the concept of, you wrote a trilogy about the creation of something we love so much. Did that ever dawn on you, or did any of that kind of factor in?
Well, it shows you the importance of imaginative freedom, that if you're working within a universe, you not only have to understand the personality of the original creators, such as they make it obvious, but you got to kind of take a look at the settings and the history that they are laying out, and you got to fill it in. And that's what you do in a novel every time. In this case, I was given extraordinary freedom, which I really appreciate. But working on any of my notes, I just finished a book called The Unfinished Land. And revising that and going in and cutting out chapters and so on is, it's never easy doing this sort of thing. But it is something that is can leave a lasting impression. And I look back at all the science fiction writers, the fantasy writers over time, including the Halo writers, and all that they've done to help create this. That comes out of the blood on the sweat of the brow as you're trying to figure these stories out. And it's never easy. And boy, you got to appreciate the creative aspects of this. When you get into the game creation, that's even more tense and sometimes very expensive. And that's another level of creativity. And just working with these folks was a privilege.
And very, very, very last question. One of the guys, Colin, asks, did you know about Cortana's heel turn when you were writing about the Forerunner books? Essentially, Cortana, I'm sure you're aware, Chloe, has changed completely, and she's gotten access to the domain, which was another, I don't know if you guys created the domain, but that was another head scratcher of trying to wrap my brain around this concept.
You created the domain, didn't you, Dad?
I think so, yeah. The domain was an old science fiction idea, highly amended for this usage, and I thought it would be kind of cool to break it in there. But yeah, to have Cortana, a crazy AI, having access to this wisdom is got to be great fun.
I mean, I saw her heel turn coming since Halo 1, so I wasn't that surprised.
Oh, really? How much of that was your influence, Chloe? Did you break Cortana for us? Was that you?
No, that was them. That was their plan.
Yeah, I didn't have much to do about that.
So she's now the bad guy, which is what we get to deal with now. So
Presumably.
that broke a lot of heart.
Yeah, me too.
That broke my heart. Yeah. Even though you saw it coming?
Yeah. Well, it's tragedy.
Yeah, it is. Okay, that's kind of it, really, guys. Unless Krista, Oren, Aaron, would you guys like to ask anything or we wrap up?
I have a question. It's I think it's simple, but I just wanted to say that my favorite chapter in the whole trilogy is, I think, in Primordium, when you describe essentially the creation of the Flood and kind of how the parasite starts off and then manifests into this intergalactic villain that we face throughout the games and the books. And you've mentioned throughout the show that you've kind of taken different inspirations from other books, and I was wondering where might have some of the inspirations for how the Flood essentially is born came from, or if that was part of the foundations of what we already know about the Flood from previous games.
Well, both. I think I'm harking back to blood music in my own brain, but also a lot of science fiction that has to deal with biological evolution and changes, and the challenge of. I actually don't specifically remember whether there was contribution from 343 in that aspect, but there might have been. But dealing with that kind of stuff is just stock and trade for science fiction writers. You got to come up with the incomprehensible and describe it.
And I just think it was just described just so well. I think that was maybe one of the. If there are many parts of the books that were hard to picture and visualize, I think that chapter was one that, at least for me, like just hands down, just was able to really see it very vividly, and kind of how it manifested. It just, all the pieces just started making sense, and it was just like, wow, this is just so interesting, considering of how the Flood develops within the trilogy, but just also how much of an impact it makes throughout the Halo universe. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, I appreciate that. And what you could do is you could take a look at blood music and let me know if in fact, I was influenced by that.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Would you guys like to plug anything yourself? I know Greg and Chloe, you're working on things. Is there anything you would like to announce or say? Go check this out. Go to this. Go to
Oh
that?
yeah, I actually just launched a blog like just last week. Like tabletop RPGs have always been a passion of mine, so I'd launched this blog that's going to talk about like present a different non-Dungeons and Dragons tabletop RPG every month and talk about what it is, why it's cool, and then also give you like a starter scenario with pre-made characters and like a campaign outline to go on from there. So you can, if you like it, you can just pick it up and run with it. So that's called Tabletop Infinities, and you can find it at tabletopinfinities.tumblr.com.
Actually, there's definitely some overlap with their audiences there. I'd say you've a safe bet there advertising that here.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this. I just launched it. I don't know, the first campaign outline. It's talking about Mage the Ascension, which is one of my favorite role-playing games. So it's like urban fantasy, kind of like Harry Potter versus the Matrix. And the
That's
campaign
some
outline is like a source book for the entire magical community and history of the city of Seattle. So that's fun.
Oh, it had to be Seattle, didn't it?
That's where Wizards of the Coast is.
That's where I am, so I know everything. Yeah, there's a lot of nerds up here. These, I don't know, Microsoft, 343, Nintendo, Bungie.
Yep. All good people. And I want, if you're a real Halo fan of the military stuff, you might take a look at my trilogy, War Dogs, which is a three-volume set of space war in a very realistic tone, but with a lot of strange stuff in it. So highly recommend War Dogs. And I'm working on, as I say right now, getting the last editorial plugs for a fantasy called The Unfinished Land, which basically covers everything we know and love.
That's a fine plug. Guys, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I know it had been some years since they were written, but greatly appreciated from both of you.
Yeah, you did great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please visit our website, halopodcastevolve.com. Also, halopodcast.com. We also got that grab very recently. Come check out our community hub. We have an amazing website. It's so good. Ian does all hard work on it. We're in Discord, we're on Facebook, we're on Xbox Live. With that, I'm just going to say, evolved.
Evolve.